deep beneath the grand cathedral, where the faithful once gathered to receive communion of a different kind, water drips endlessly through forgotten chambers. The sound echoes through corridors that the healing church abandoned long ago, when their experiments grew too terrible even for those who played God with human flesh. Down here, past the twisted remnants of cosmic ambition, past the failures that crawl and writhe in darkness, sits a being of impossible beauty and unfathomable sorrow. She does not turn when footsteps disturb the ancient dust. She does not rise when a hunter's blade catches the pale blue light that emanates from her ethereal form. Ebrietas, daughter of the cosmos, mourns eternally over a corpse that might have been her only companion in this dimension of loneliness. Welcome, lore seekers, to another deep dive with Keen 7 Lore, where we unravel the mysteries that lurk in gaming's darkest corners. Today, we descend into one of Bloodborne's most tragic tales, the story of a goddess who chose cooperation over transcendence, who offered humanity the keys to evolution, and who received only abandonment and violence in return. This is the story of Ebrietas, the Great One who dared to bridge the gap between the cosmic and the mortal, and paid a price that echoes through every drop of tainted blood that flows through Yarnam's cursed veins. Consider for a moment the profound tragedy of her existence. Among all the great ones, those beings who exist in dimensions our minds can barely comprehend, Ebrietas alone extended her hand in friendship, while others like the moon presence manipulate humanity through dreams and madness, while Mergo's wet nurse guards her charge in nightmarish realms, while Amygdala transport hunters through dimensions with callous indifference, Ebrietas chose to stay. She chose to help. She chose to trust. The chamber where we find her tells a story before any lore note is read or item description parsed. The altar of despair, they call it, though whether that name refers to her grief or humanity's desperate attempts to touch the divine remains deliberately ambiguous. Water pools around her tentacled lower body, reflecting the cosmic light that seems to emanate from within her translucent flesh. Before her lies a spider-like corpse, crushed beneath fallen masonry, its many eyes forever closed. Some say this is Rom, the vacuous spider, though Rom still guards the lake when we encounter Ebrietas. Others theorize it represents a failed attempt to recreate Rom's ascension, another experiment in forced evolution that ended in tragedy. But watch how Ebrietas positions herself, not standing guard, not performing some arcane ritual, but simply mourning. Head bowed, wings folded, she grieves with a patience that only an immortal being could possess. This image alone should give any hunter pause. Here is a creature of the cosmos, a being whose very existence defies human understanding, and she exhibits the most human emotion of all, grief. She doesn't attack when we enter her sanctuary. She doesn't even acknowledge our presence initially. Only when we raise our weapons, only when we prove that humanity's response to the divine will always be violence, does she defend herself. And even then, if you've ever fought her, you know there's something different about this battle. Where other great ones seem eager to destroy or transform us, Ebrietas fights with what can only be described as reluctance. If you're enjoying this exploration into one of Bloodborne's most fascinating characters, I'd genuinely appreciate if you'd hit that like button. It truly helps this content reach other lore enthusiasts who might be searching for answers to these cosmic mysteries. Your support makes these deep investigations possible, and every like helps the algorithm understand that people still hunger for these detailed explorations of gaming's richest narratives. The story of how Ebrietas came to reside beneath the grand cathedral reads like a fever dream penned by someone who glimpsed too much truth. According to the scattered records we can piece together from item descriptions and environmental storytelling, she wasn't summoned or created by the healing church. She was discovered, abandoned in the ancient Pumerian labyrinths that sprawl beneath Yarnam like the root system of some cosmic tree. The Augur of Ebrietas, one of the hunter tools we can obtain, provides our first crucial clue. Great volumes of water serve as a bulwark guarding her sleep and an augur of the eldritch truth. remnant of the encounter with the Great One, Ebrietas, daughter of the cosmos in the old Labyrinth. This description confirms she was already there, waiting in the depths when the church's tomb prospectors first encountered her. But why was she abandoned? The answer might lie in her very name and nature. Ebrietas is described consistently as the daughter of the cosmos, a title that sets her apart from other great ones. While beings like the moon presence and the orphan of Kos are defined by their relationships to concepts or places, Ebrietas is defined by lineage. She is someone's daughter. In the hierarchy of great ones, this positioning suggests something profound. She may be lesser among her kind, perhaps even an outcast. The land of Is, from which Ebrietas originates, exists in the deeper reaches of the Chalice dungeon labyrinth. The great Is Chalice tells us that this was the land of the great ones. But something happened there, something that caused Ebrietas to be left behind when the others ascended to higher planes of existence. Was she too weak? Too young? Or did she choose to remain, already showing the affinity for lower dimensions that would later lead her to cooperate with humanity? If you're finding value in unraveling these cosmic mysteries, consider subscribing to join our community of lore seekers. Together, we explore gaming's deepest narratives, and your subscription ensures you won't miss any of these comprehensive investigations into the stories that games sometimes hide in their darkest corners. Her physical form offers clues to her nature and perhaps her tragedy. Unlike the aggressive, predatory appearance of most great ones, Ebrietas possesses an almost ethereal beauty. Her upper body appears humanoid, though pale and elongated, with wings that seem more suited for swimming through cosmic void than flying through air. Her lower body transforms into a mass of tentacles, reminiscent of deep-sea creatures that exist in the crushing darkness where sunlight never reaches. This aquatic appearance connects her to the theme of depths, both literal and metaphorical, that runs throughout Bloodborne's narrative. The most telling detail might be her head, split down the middle as if revealing the cosmos within. This isn't a wound or deformity, it's her natural state, a being whose very thoughts exist partially in our dimension and partially in others. When she uses her most powerful attacks, cosmic energy pours from this split, as if she's opening a window to dimensions our minds cannot fully process. The Call Beyond, another tool derived from her knowledge, attempts to recreate this phenomenon, though with far less potency than the original. The Latin etymology of her name provides another layer of meaning that enriches our understanding. Ebrietas translates to inebriation or drunkenness, creating a sophisticated wordplay with the concept of blood ministration. The citizens of Yharnam became drunk on blood, intoxicated by the promise of evolution and healing. But what if Ebrietas herself represents the source of this intoxication? Her blood appears more serum-like than the thick, dark blood of beasts or even other kin. When the church discovered her, they found not just a great one willing to cooperate, but potentially the source of the old blood itself. This theory gains credibility when we examine the choir, the highest-ranking members of the healing church who took custody of Ebrietas after her discovery. The choir didn't just study her. They built their entire doctrine around communion with her. The Cosmic Eye Watcher badge tells us, the choir stumbled upon an epiphany, very suddenly and quite by accident. Here we stand, feet planted in the earth, but might the cosmos be very near us, only just above our heads? This epiphany occurred after they brought Ebrietas to the Grand Cathedral and began their experiments in earnest. The relationship between Ebrietas and the choir represents something unique in Bloodborne's world, genuine cooperation between human and Great One. While other factions forced their evolution through blood ministration or made deals with cosmic entities they barely understood, the choir engaged in what appears to be actual communication with Ebrietas. The Augur of Ebrietas doesn't summon her against her will. It's described as a remnant of the encounter, suggesting she gave this knowledge willingly. The phantasms that appear when using the Augur aren't enslaved projections, but gifts, partial manifestations of her power that she allowed humanity to channel. Consider the profound implications of this cooperation. Ebrietas, a being of cosmic intelligence and power, chose to help humanity ascend. She provided knowledge, blood, and direct assistance in creating new forms of life. The celestial emissaries, those small-headed beings we encounter throughout the Upper Cathedral ward, represent successful attempts at controlled evolution under her guidance. They're not the twisted failures we see in other church experiments, but functioning beings that exist between human and cosmos. The Orphanage, that darkest of choir facilities, takes on new meaning when we understand Ebrietas' involvement. The choir didn't just experiment on orphans out of convenience or cruelty, they were attempting to create something specific. The orphanage key tells us these children were groomed to become celestial children, beings that could serve as surrogate offspring for a great one who had lost her own. Look at the celestial children we encounter, bulbous-headed creatures that seem more sorrowful than aggressive, reaching out with thin arms as if seeking comfort that never comes. These might have been Ebrietas' attempt to cure her loneliness, to create beings that could exist in her reality and provide the companionship she lost when the other great ones abandoned her. The experiments weren't entirely one-sided exploitation. Evidence suggests Ebrietas genuinely tried to help humanity transcend their limitations. The research hall, that nightmare of human experimentation, shows us the process wasn't always successful, but the intent might have been benevolent, at least from Ebrietas' perspective. What seems like horror to human eyes might have been genuine attempts at elevation from a being whose understanding of existence transcends our concept of life and death. The patients in the research hall, their heads swollen with eyes on the inside, represent failed attempts to achieve the cosmic insight that Ebrietas possessed naturally. Lady Maria, who guards the way to this nightmare, committed suicide rather than face what had been done there. But consider this, what if Ebrietas saw these experiments differently? To a great one, the transformation of flesh might be no more traumatic than a caterpillar entering a chrysalis. The horror lies not in the intent, but in the fundamental incompatibility between human and cosmic perspectives. This incompatibility becomes most apparent when we examine the spider corpse at the altar of despair. The creature bears an unmistakable resemblance to Rome, the vacuous spider, who was once human, a Bergenworth scholar who achieved a successful transformation into a great one. The fact that Ebrietas mourns over this corpse suggests a deep connection. Some theorize this is Rom's true body, and what we fight at the Moonside Lake is merely a projection. Others believe it's a failed attempt to recreate Rom's transformation, perhaps even Ebrietas' attempt to create a companion who could share her dimensional existence. The altar of despair itself holds power beyond mere symbolism. When we bring the queenly flesh to this altar, time reverses, and Queen Annalise is restored from a pulp of crushed meat to her original form. This power over time and causality reveals the extent of Ebrietas' abilities. She doesn't just exist in our dimension. She has the power to manipulate its fundamental laws. Yet she uses this power not for conquest or destruction, but to preserve and restore. The name Altar of Despair takes on multiple meanings in this context. It could reference Ebrietas' despair at her abandonment, humanity's desperate attempts to evolve, or the ultimate despair of realizing that some gaps can never be bridged. The altar serves as a meeting point between dimensions, a place where the cosmic and mortal briefly align but never truly merge. When we trace the flow of events, a pattern emerges that reveals the true tragedy of Ebrietas' story. The great Chalice, which she either guarded or gifted to the choir, opens the path to the land of and the powerful secrets within. This chalice became one of the church's most prized possessions, allowing them to delve deeper into the labyrinths and uncover more of the old blood. Every holy chalice we use, every depth we explore, connects back to knowledge that Ebrietas shared. The irony cuts deep when we realize that Ebrietas' cooperation ultimately led to Yharnam's downfall. Her blood, whether directly or through derivatives, became the source of the beast scourge, the very gift she offered. Evolution beyond human limitations became the curse that transformed citizens into beasts. The choir's experiments, conducted with her assistance, created not just celestial emissaries, but also the failures that haunt the Upper Cathedral ward. The blue-skinned creatures that patrol those halls, heads bloated with false insight, represent the majority who couldn't handle the transformation. Yet Ebrietas never stopped cooperating. Even as the city fell into chaos, even as the church abandoned the upper cathedral ward, she remained at her altar. When we find her, the choir is gone, fled, or dead. But she stays, still mourning, still waiting. This faithfulness speaks to either incredible loyalty or an inability to abandon the purpose she chose for herself. Among great ones who seem driven by incomprehensible motivations, Ebrietas shows something almost like devotion. The combat encounter with Ebrietas, should the player choose violence, reveals the full extent of her tragic nature. She doesn't initiate combat. This bears repeating because it's so unusual in Bloodborne's world. A boss that won't attack unless provoked. When she does fight, her attacks demonstrate the cosmic power she's been sharing with humanity. She summons the very cosmos into the cathedral, calling down arcane meteors that seem to tear through dimensional boundaries. Her charge attacks show surprising speed for such a large being, as if she briefly exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously. But watch her movements carefully during this fight. There's a mournfulness to her attacks, a reluctance in her devastating arcane beams. When she's defeated, she doesn't rage or curse. She simply fades, her cosmic light dimming until only silence remains. In a game filled with spectacular boss deaths, hers feels understated, almost resigned. It's as if she always knew this would be humanity's ultimate response to her offer of friendship. The tools that remain after her death, or rather the tools that continue to function, suggest that Ebrietas' death doesn't mean complete cessation of existence. The augur of Ebrietas still summons phantasms. A call beyond still channels cosmic power. These tools work because Ebrietas, like all great ones, doesn't truly die in the conventional sense. She's displaced, pushed into a different dimensional state, but her power remains accessible to those who know how to reach across the veil. This persistence after death parallels Rom's continued protection of Yharnam even after we defeat her, or the way the orphan of Kos's curse persists across nightmare and reality. Great ones exist in ways that transcend physical destruction, and Ebrietas' gifts to humanity continue even after humanity betrays her. It's the ultimate expression of her chosen role, to aid human evolution regardless of the cost to herself. The lore community has long debated whether Ebrietas is a true Great One or an ascended being, sometimes called kin. The distinction matters because it would change the nature of her story. If she's kin, a being that achieved Great One status through transformation rather than being born to it, then her cooperation with humanity takes on new meaning. She would understand the desire to transcend because she experienced it herself. Her abandoned state might not be because other Great Ones left her, but because they never accepted her as truly one of them. Evidence for the kin theory includes her presence in the Perfumerian labyrinths, suggesting possible Perfumerian origins, and her vulnerability to specific damage types that affect kin differently than true Great Ones. The counter-argument points to her confirmed ability to grant audience, her cosmic powers, and most importantly, the way other characters and items consistently refer to her as a Great One without qualification. Perhaps the truth incorporates both theories. Ebrietas might represent a successful elevation to Great One status achieved in the ancient past, but her origins in lower dimensions made her sympathetic to humanity's similar aspirations. She chose to help because she remembered what it felt like to reach for something greater, to desire transformation so desperately that any price seemed worth paying. The relationship between Ebrietas and Rom deserves special consideration because it might reveal the ultimate tragedy of the abandoned goddess. Rom, we know, was a Bergenworth scholar who achieved transformation through unknown means. Master Willem's research, the Cord of the Eye, and various rituals culminated in Rom's ascension. But what if Ebrietas played a role in this transformation? What if the spider corpse at her altar represents not just a companion but a student, someone she guided through the same transformation she once experienced? The timeline supports this possibility. Ebrietas was discovered relatively early in the Church's exploration of the labyrinths. Rome's transformation occurred during the Bergenworth era, but the connections between the college and the early Church run deep. If Ebrietas aided in Rome's transformation only to lose her to death or a higher dimension, it would explain the depth of her mourning. She succeeded in elevating a human to Great One status, proving it was possible, but lost the one being who might have understood her position between worlds. This loss would make humanity's betrayal even more profound. Ebrietas helped create Rome, shared her knowledge with the choir, provided the tools for human evolution, and accepted the experiments that created the celestial children. She gave everything, held nothing back, and in return, humanity abandoned her when the beast scourge made the upper cathedral ward too dangerous to maintain. The choir fled, the church collapsed, and Ebrietas was left alone with her grief and the corpse of what might have been her greatest success. The upper cathedral ward itself tells the story of this abandonment through environmental storytelling. Broken windows let in pale moonlight that illuminates dust motes floating through empty halls. The celestial emissaries patrol without purpose, their cosmic evolution meaningless without the context of the choir's grand design. The brain creatures that lurk in corners represent failures that were never cleaned up, never given the mercy of death. Everything speaks to a hurried evacuation, a desperate flight from consequences that had spiraled beyond control. In the grand narrative of Bloodborne, Ebrietas represents the road not taken. What if humanity had approached the cosmos with humility instead of ambition? What if the church had been content with the knowledge Ebrietas shared rather than demanding more? What if someone, anyone, had chosen to comfort the mourning goddess instead of harvesting her blood? These questions haunt the narrative because we can see, through Ebrietas' cooperation, that a different relationship with the cosmic was possible. The fact that she's optional to fight makes this theme even stronger. The player can complete Bloodborne without ever raising a weapon against Ebrietas. She can be left to her eternal mourning, a goddess abandoned but not destroyed. This choice, to fight or not to fight, puts the player in the position of deciding whether to complete humanity's betrayal or leave at least this one cosmic bridge unburned. When we examine the larger context of Great Ones in Bloodborne, Ebrietas' uniqueness becomes even more apparent. The moon presence manipulates hunters through dreams, using them as tools in cosmic conflicts we barely understand. Murgo's wet nurse exists solely to guard an infant, Great One, showing no interest in anything beyond its purpose. The amygdalae transport people seemingly at random, following rules that make sense only to them. Adon exists only as a voice, formless and incomprehensible. Among all these beings of cosmic indifference or active manipulation, Ebrietas alone reached out in what appears to be genuine partnership. Our story also illuminates the Healing Church's fundamental misunderstanding of cosmic truth. They sought evolution through blood ministration, believing that consuming the old blood would elevate them. But Ebrietas' cooperation suggests that evolution wasn't meant to be taken, it was meant to be given. The Church's greed, their demand for immediate transformation rather than gradual understanding, corrupted what could have been a beneficial relationship. The choir, despite being the Church's elite, made the same mistake on a more sophisticated level. They understood that the cosmos was close, just above their heads, but they tried to drag it down rather than reach up to meet it. The celestial emissaries and children represent their attempts to mass-produce cosmic evolution, to systematize what should have been a personal, possibly spiritual transformation. This systematization of the divine appears throughout the Healing Church's practices. They turned blood ministration into a medical procedure, insight into a measurable quantity, and Great One cooperation into a resource to be exploited. Ebrietas, in her willingness to help, became just another tool in their arsenal rather than a teacher or partner. The hunter tools derive from her. The augur, a call beyond, the phantasms, represent this mechanization of cosmic power. Yet even in this exploitation, Ebrietas' gifts show restraint and wisdom. A call beyond creates a small explosion of stars, beautiful and deadly but limited in scope. The augur summons tentacles that quickly retreat. These aren't world-ending powers but focused tools that suggest Ebrietas understood humanity's limitations. She gave what we could handle, no more, perhaps hoping we would grow into greater understanding over time. The tragedy is that we never did grow. Instead, humanity demanded more blood, more power, more transformation, until the very city that should have been elevated by Ebrietas' gifts collapsed under the weight of its own ambition. The beast scourge, whether directly from Ebrietas' blood or from derivatives and experiments based on her essence, spread faster than evolution could occur. For every successful celestial emissary, dozens became beasts or failures. This ratio of failure to success might explain why Ebrietas mourns so deeply. She sees not just the death of one potential companion, but the failure of an entire species to transcend. Every beast roaming Yharnam's streets represents someone who could have evolved but didn't, someone who took the gift she offered and twisted it into something monstrous. Her mourning encompasses not just personal loss, but the tragedy of potential unfulfilled. The player's journey to reach Ebrietas requires obtaining the Orphanage key, a symbolic requirement that forces us to confront the choir's experiments before meeting their patron. Walking through the orphanage, seeing the empty beds and abandoned toys, understanding that children were transformed into celestial children here. All of this context colors our eventual encounter with Ebrietas. By the time we reach her, we've seen both the heights of what she tried to help humanity achieve and the depths of how humanity perverted her gifts. Some players interpret Ebrietas' non-aggression as indifference, suggesting she's so lost in mourning that she doesn't care about the hunter's presence. But careful observation suggests otherwise. Her positioning changes slightly when we enter, a subtle acknowledgement of our presence. She knows we're there. She simply chooses not to act unless we force her hand. This conscious choice not to attack first, despite knowing that humans have historically meant her harm, shows either incredible faith or final resignation. The music that plays in her chamber before combat begins is worth noting for its unusual qualities. Unlike the dramatic orchestrations that accompany most boss encounters, Ebrietas' theme starts with mournful strings and what sounds like distant crying. It's less a battle theme and more a lament, as if the game itself mourns what's about to happen. When combat begins, the music swells but never loses that undercurrent of sadness. We're not fighting a monster. We're completing a tragedy that began when the first tomb prospector discovered an abandoned goddess willing to help. The visual design of the Altar of Despair reinforces these themes through every detail. The architecture blends Pthumerian stonework with church additions, showing how humanity built upon ancient foundations without truly understanding them. Water, that symbol of depth and hidden knowledge, pools everywhere, suggesting tears or the amniotic fluid of cosmic birth. The lighting comes not from candles or lanterns, but from Ebrietas herself and mysterious sources above, as if the cosmos peers down through cracks in reality. When analyzing Ebrietas' attacks for those who choose combat, each one reveals something about her nature. Her charge isn't the wild rush of a beast, but a controlled movement through space that seems to briefly ignore physics. Her arcane laser attacks carve through dimensions rather than simply dealing damage. Most tellingly, her blood attacks, where she damages herself to spray blood that causes frenzy, suggests that her very essence is too much for human minds to process. She literally bleeds cosmic truth, and that truth drives men mad. The frenzy aspect connects Ebrietas to the broader theme of insight and madness that runs throughout Bloodborne. The more we understand about the cosmos, the more our human minds struggle to contain that knowledge. Ebrietas, in her full cosmic glory, represents insight incarnate. Simply being in her presence and seeing her true form challenges our sanity. This might explain why the choir used intermediaries and tools rather than direct communion. Prolonged exposure to Ebrietas would have destroyed their minds even as it elevated their understanding. Her connection to water and the depths also links her to the fishing hamlet and the origins of the hunter's nightmare. While Ebrietas wasn't directly involved in the hamlet's tragedy, the parallel situations are striking. In both cases, humanity discovered something cosmic and oceanic, something that should have been approached with reverence. In both cases, humanity chose exploitation and violence. The curse that created the hunter's nightmare might be Casa's response. But Ebrietas' tragedy shows she chose a different path. Cooperation even unto betrayal. This choice defines what makes Ebrietas unique among Bloodborne's pantheon of cosmic beings. She had every reason to hate humanity, every justification for violence, every right to withhold her gifts. The other great ones abandoned her. Humanity exploited her, and in the end, we hunt her down in her own sanctuary. Yet she never strikes first. She maintains her position at the altar, mourning her losses, but never seeking revenge. In the context of Bloodborne's themes about the cycles of violence and the corruption of ambition, Ebrietas represents the possibility of breaking these cycles. She shows that great ones aren't inherently hostile to humanity, that cosmic evolution doesn't require violence, and that cooperation between dimensions is possible. Her tragedy lies not in her nature, but in humanity's inability to accept what she offered without trying to take more. The items we gained from her death reinforce this interpretation. The greatest chalice opens paths to greater depths and more dangerous knowledge. The blood echoes. That currency of power in Yharnam flood into the hunter who kills her. We literally profit from destroying the one being that tried to help us. The kin-cold blood that sometimes drops from her death crystallizes the irony. We reduce a goddess to currency, a teacher to experience points. For players who delve into the Chalice dungeons, Ebrietas can be encountered again in the Chalice labyrinths. This version of her, found in her original habitat, fights with more aggression but the same mournful atmosphere. Seeing her in the depths, in the place where the church first found her, completes the picture of her journey. She was taken from her home, brought to the surface, used for humanity's purposes, and then abandoned when we no longer needed her. Even in death, even in the cycling nature of the Chalice dungeons where she can be fought repeatedly, she remains trapped in the role humanity forced upon her. The philosophical implications of Ebrietas' story extend beyond the game's narrative into questions about humanity's relationship with the divine or the unknown. When we encounter something greater than ourselves, do we seek to understand it or exploit it? When offered help, do we accept it with gratitude or demand more? When faced with the incomprehensible, do we approach with humility or violence? Ebrietas' fate suggests that humanity, at least in Bloodborne's world, consistently chooses the worse option. Yet there's hope hidden in her tragedy. The fact that she chose to help at all means that bridging the gap between human and cosmic is possible. The celestial emissaries, despite being products of exploitation, represent successful evolution. The knowledge she shared, despite being misused, advanced human understanding. If humanity had approached her differently, if the church had been less greedy, if the choir had been more patient, perhaps Yharnam's fate would have been different. This counterfactual history haunts the upper cathedral ward. Every empty room whispers of what could have been. Every abandoned experiment suggests a path not taken. Every echo of Ebrietas' mournful presence reminds us that a goddess offered us the stars, and we chose to pull her down to earth instead of letting her lift us up. As we stand before her in that final moment, weapon in hand or sheathed, we face the ultimate question of Bloodborne's narrative. What does it mean to be human in a cosmos that dwarfs our understanding? Ebrietas answered that question with cooperation, choosing to see humanity's potential rather than its limitations. Humanity answered with exploitation and violence, proving that perhaps we weren't ready for the gifts she offered. The lasting impact of Ebrietas on Bloodborne's world cannot be overstated. Every church hunter who uses arcane tools channels her knowledge. Every blood vial consumed might contain traces of her essence. Every attempt to understand the cosmos builds on foundations she helped establish. Even in absence, even in death, she shapes the world through the consequences of her generosity. A boss that doesn't attack first, that has to be sought out rather than confronted, that represents tragedy rather than evil. These choices show. From software pushing against the conventional boundaries of what a boss encounter can mean, She's not an obstacle to overcome, but a choice to make. Not a monster to slay, but a mirror that reflects humanity's worst impulses. The community's fascination with Ebrietas speaks to how successfully her tragedy resonates with players. In a game filled with memorable bosses and cosmic horrors, she stands out, not for her difficulty or her design, though both are remarkable, but for what she represents. Forums still debate her origins, artists still capture her mournful beauty, and lore hunters still search for connections between her and other elements of Bloodborne's mythology. Thank you for joining me in this deep exploration of one of gaming's most tragic figures. If this journey through Ebrietas' story has given you new appreciation for Bloodborne's narrative depth, please consider subscribing to the channel. Here at Keen 7 Lore, we believe that games tell stories that deserve to be fully understood, fully appreciated, and fully preserved. Your subscription helps ensure these investigations continue, these stories get told, and these digital myths receive the attention they deserve. Every week, we dive into another corner of gaming's vast narrative landscape, uncovering the stories that developers hide in item descriptions, environmental details, and symbolic design. From the tragic to the triumphant, from the obvious to the obscure, we explore it all with the depth and respect these narratives deserve. Remember that Ebrietas' story is ultimately about choices. The choice to cooperate or exploit, to trust or betray, to evolve or remain stagnant. In your own journey through Yharnam, you face these same choices. Will you consume the old blood without thought for its origins? Will you hunt every creature that seemed different or threatening? Will you seek insight at any cost, or will you remember that some knowledge comes with a price measured in more than blood echoes? Until next time, fellow lore seekers, remember that in the depths of every game world lie stories waiting to be discovered. Keep your eyes open, your insight high, and your curiosity endless. This has been Keen 7 Lore, reminding you that the real treasures in gaming aren't always the items we collect or the bosses we defeat, but the stories we uncover and the meanings we construct from the beautiful, terrible worlds we explore.